Welcome to our series of special podcasts this week from Business in Vancouver, honoring our recipients of Chief Financial Officer of the Year. The awards and our podcasts are made possible with the partnership as a presenting sponsor of the Chartered Professional Accountants of British Columbia and with the sponsorship of TELUS. We're grateful for their support, particularly during a very challenging year. And it has been a challenging year for almost all businesses. And our 6 recipients are emblematic of how financial stewardship has excelled in many instances in our province. Our guests today are 2 of the 6 winners. Other podcasts in this series will feature the other 4. CFO Hitesh Katare of the BC Children's Hospital, one of our province's most respected institutions, is the winner in our not-for-profit category. And CFO and VP Acquisitions Greg Goodmanis of Diversified Royalty Corporation, a firm that acquires top-line royalty streams, is the winner in our Rising Star category. Congratulations to both of you. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Greg, let me start with you. It's been an extraordinary year. Help me understand what you've learned.
Well, that the world can change very quickly, and obviously working, with all the stakeholders involved has been very active. And right from the start, we have 6 royalty partners, fantastic businesses, and different challenges affect different businesses in various ways, and some a lot more than others. As you can imagine, full service dining is one of the more harder hits. Oil change would be less so. But across the board, working with those management teams, being proactive with our lenders, chatting obviously with our auditors and shareholders, and keeping everyone apprised of what we're doing, and has been really the lay of the land for the beginning of the chaos anyway.
Yeah, Tesh, what's been the education in 2020?
A few things. The really quick transition from working from the office to working remotely from home was amazing. Our IT did a great job, and with the advent of the technology that's available nowadays, with virtual private networks, and for our case, Microsoft Office 365. I mean, you can really work seamlessly from anywhere, and that's the lesson that came to light. Prior to the pandemic, we were very much an organization that preferred people to work from the office because there was a lot of cultural benefit to doing so. And while that has been obviously lost a little bit, I would say, the ability to actually work from home has been pretty seamless.
Yeah.
In terms of our business, similar to what Greg said, there's been some parts of our operation that have definitely had to pivot very significantly. For example, our galas, obviously you can't have 500 people galas anymore. So we've had to look at digital fundraising strategies to offset that. But thankfully, we are quite a diversified operation, and that has meant a big deal to us because parts of our operation continue to do very well, even in this pandemic environment.
I want to ask both of you, and I'll start with you, Hitesh, stick with you for a second here. When a pandemic hits, how does a CFO have to lean in?
Well, every organization is different. I will tell you that at our organization, we have built some contingency reserves for the unknown, for crises times like this. And so for us, it was very much steady as she goes. We didn't want to panic our employees with what was going on. And for us, it was really important to, in fact, convey the opposite to our employees, to convey job security and the fact that we're here for them during this difficult time, and we're going to stay with them. And, hopefully that loyalty will pay off once the pandemic passes, because it is, prior to this pandemic hitting, it was a very tight job market, both in the not-for-profit sector, but I think even in the for-profit sector. And so to me, one of the lessons learned is really, you've got to show that trust in your people on a long-term basis. So that's one takeaway for myself. And the other one, like I said, is we're lucky that we've got contingency reserves so we can still withstand something like this. I worry about smaller, especially charities that might be relying on 1 or 2 primary sources of funding. It's going to be hard for them.
Yeah. Greg, how do you feel a CFO leans in at a time like this?
I think communication is important. I think everyone wants to be in the loop and know, and even if you don't have the answer, at least chatting with them and telling that you don't know the answer is very important. And one of the things I do remember years ago being a young investment banker with a gentleman called Fred Wright at Capital West, and one of the lessons he taught was tag. The tag, as he called it, was very important. and always reaching out more often than you think, even if you don't know the answer yet, has been important. So right out of the start, obviously reached out to a realty partner, set out regular communication with them. Lenders very important. We're fortunate to have the support of 3 excellent financial institutions, but tagging them, so to speak, regularly. How are the weekly sales doing? What are your projected covenants going to be? Do we know what next week's going to be? And it might just be simply, we don't know. Here's what we do know. And that open communication, I think, is very important in a time of crisis, as opposed to silence. Because in a void of information, people assume the worst. And so even if you don't know or the information isn't great, it's still always better to reach out and just inform people what you know.
Yeah.
And similarly for us,
sorry, go ahead.
Kirk, similarly for us too. I mean, it points to the fact that for us, our primary stakeholder obviously are our donor base, and not being able to see our donors face to face in this pandemic environment has really made us think about how do we still connect with our donor base. And so we've done a lot of work and effort on just pure gratitude calls or stewardship phone calls with our donor base, just to keep them up to date with what's going on in the organization, what's going on at the hospital, so that they're connected. Because one of the fears you have with this pandemic is you lose that connection.
Yeah, I'll follow up on that one, Hitesh. I mean, I heard from a couple of other charitable organizations that when the pandemic struck, in fact, their longstanding donors were right there, right away, basically offering some support. And it was also very difficult once they were done to keep following through. That was the period where it became a little bit more challenging. Was that the experience there?
Very much so, very much so. We established a rapid response fund right away because COVID, although it's had a lesser impact on children, it does affect children as well. And so the BC Children's Hospital was also sort of set up for dealing with COVID. And there was an outpouring from the public as to what can they do. And so we did set up a rapid response fund. So that was one example of where our loyal donors came through. But also the other area that surprisingly we did notice was our monthly donor program, which is some of our most loyal donors who give us on a monthly basis. That's actually increased in this pandemic environment.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. I mean, Greg, your partnerships are really quite diverse, and some would have obviously operated and fared better in this term than others. Does it mean that you shower a lot more attention on those that are having slightly more challenges in all of this, or do you actually try to make sure that those that are actually faring pretty well are really doing extraordinary contributions here?
Well, we try to do both, and obviously be in touch and see what assistance we can provide. We're not operating management. We've partnered with excellent businesses with very strong management teams, and so we're not trying to overstep and tell them what to do. We very much support them and believe in them. But to your first question, the reality is, yes, you end up spending more time with the challenges, and whether or not the challenge is proportionate as a percentage of your business, huge, small, or medium. If it is a challenge, that's where you have to spend your attention and time. And as you can imagine, the pandemic did not hit businesses in different industries equally, some much more than others. And yes, taking the long-term view, we believe we partnered with excellent businesses, excellent brands, excellent management teams. And over a long period of time, whether it's a bit of a timeout for a few months or we'll see where it goes, not losing track of the long-term outlook. And the reason we entered into these agreements in the first place is obviously we believe in the businesses. And so taking that long-term view, despite being in a crisis situation, I think is important. And we try to do that.
Let me ask both of you, and I'll start with you, Greg. What surprised you in this period?
How quickly you can pivot to online, and to Hitesh's point of working remotely. Obviously, we have a relatively small office, and so that happened instantaneously. That worked quite well. And dealing with auditors, banks, and shareholders and such was relatively straightforward to do so with the advent of technology. One of the ones that I was most impressed with is one of our realty partners is Oxford Learning. A lot of in-person tutoring, as you can imagine, has been their business for decades. In a very short period of time, pivoting to online Zoom type of calls the success they had with that, and sort of one is testament to where we are with technology, but also to impressive management and just willpower to pivot and to work through despite a challenge. Has really surprised me how quickly everything could transition to remote, digital, online, and work despite being a challenge quite well.
I'm very impressed that you're able to entertain and cook for people in your office right there.
Yes, that's what we like to do.
That's right. Must be very good for relationship building. Exactly. And Hitesh, it looks like you're kind of locked in some kind of cell there.
I shut the blinds because of the sun, or sometimes the sun coming in, although not today. But yeah, for us, again, as I said earlier, I probably was very surprised at how seamless the transition to working remotely was. And because we're deemed non-essential, and we share our premises with the Research Institute, which is deemed essential. So in terms of returning to work for us, we're kind of at the back of the bus. We want to make sure that the research folks are able to come in earlier, and we have to share the space with them. So we're probably really going to be staying longer working remotely than some of the other organizations. And so far, so good. Like I said, it's been pretty seamless in terms of the technology enabling us to work remotely. I will say though that for us, it's been really important to recognize that it's not it's what you don't see in your employees that can be a challenge in terms of the culture, right? You can build culture a lot easily when you're all in the same environment, and that's the thing that we worry about longer term if we're going to work remotely, is how do you maintain that culture and that engagement socially with your workforce? And so we've tried to focus on some things specifically to help with that.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about that reaction, because obviously workplaces were designed for a reason, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And it's not like the idea of remote work was some kind of great innovation of 2020. I mean, offices were put together and workplaces were put together for a purpose. So how are you able to create a facsimile of that?
Well, one of the key things is constant communication, whether it's through an email or whether it's through a town hall. We do have regular town halls with the executive team and all staff. That allows for dialogue back and forth, and also just allows for communication of what's happening here at the hospital, here at research, for our foundation folks. And then on a lesser level, we've had sort of weekly virtual get-togethers in terms of having lunch together, but virtually, so that you can have a chat with a colleague. So those kinds of things. And we are thinking about what can we do as we approach the holiday season as well. We've historically had a holiday get together, and obviously now we're going to have to be careful with how we do that. But we're thinking through that, and we might have small pockets of teams of 8 to 10 people that get together.
And Greg, your shop, what have been some of those strategies?
Well, immediately when it first hit, obviously we worked remotely, and in the short term that works very smoothly. But I find you particularly lean on longevity of relationships. So if you've worked with employees for quite some time, you've built trust, you've been a rapport. To Tash's point, you've built culture, and that works relatively smoothly. And you're kind of leaning on that as a bit of a crutch. Where it starts to be more of a challenge in the longer term is younger employees, newer employees. As people join an organization without that longstanding relationship and rapport, it's hard for them. I think a lot harder to get into the culture, into the system. And so that'll be the challenge sort of as time progresses. And, in the summer we migrated a little bit directly from home to a few days a week in the office and trying to balance that. And so I spend about half my time in the office, half remote. And we've suggested 2 days a week essentially for our office at everyone's election, and, being cognizant of things that people are, not wanting to take public transit for various reasons. And so do you have to pivot your policy to, reimbursing parking, accommodating that, making sure that people are comfortable and don't feel that they're being sort of pressured into something against their will? Because I do think that, even if it's only once a week or that kind of thing, that there needs to be some, physically distant, but still face-to-face interactions, they're just vital for the long-term organizational just cohesion, I think.
Yeah, great. Hitesh, what's been your proudest moment in this period?
Just, the way everybody within the organization, first of all, starting with our foundation, has come together in this moment of crisis to pivot, to be nimble, to be flexible, to be open to change. That's been very, very impressive. And then if I go beyond the foundation for a minute, even the greater community here, the doctors and the researchers that we work with daily, they've been amazing to work with. The reality is that the pandemic is not stopping childhood diseases from continuing. People are still getting cancer, kids are still getting, blood disorders or whatever it might be. And so the openness of the doctors and researchers to try and continue to connect with our donor base through online forums. So we've had a whole bunch of sort of online webinars where our doctors and researchers showcase some of what they're doing to our donor database, albeit virtually, as opposed to here in person. So just the ability to be flexible and adapt has been amazing.
Yeah. Greg, tell me about your proudest moment.
I would say, how everyone interacted. We're mirroring a lot of the same responses here, but from our office to our royalty partner, how everyone really rallied very quickly. People didn't just tune out and say, "I'm going home and this is too scary." Everyone really tried to see what they could do to make this thing work. And as an aside and a parallel to that, I'm also on the Lionsgate Hospital Foundation board and saw the same professionalism of the medical professionals involved, but the rallying of the community and seeing how immediately everyone stepped up, wanted to be a part, whether it's from, can I drop things off? Can I donate something? Can I be involved? And I thought it was, it's easy to get cynical watching the news, but when a crisis hit and seeing how sort of humanity rallied was really heartwarming, I thought.
Yeah, I've asked a lot of questions about what you've learned in this time, and you've answered in a lot of cases about the operations that you're part of, but I want to ask what you've learned about yourselves. Greg?
That, and a lot reflects on, whether it's just work life, charity involvement, but also family as well, that it's important to pause and make sure that, your family's okay and that your children are not too stressed about a very challenging situation, and trying to really pause and accept where reality is, and really focusing on things that are important. And, for me, that would personally be family.
Yeah. Has it given you a slightly different balance, you think, that might sustain?
It's always hard to tell how, balance swings one year to the next, but for sure, I have definitely, really appreciated a lot more of the time with my family, with my kids, and, it can be on top of each other in a house when everyone's home from school all the time. But really, trying to reflect on that and see how important it is, and try not to lose sight of that as the world, progresses on and returns back to whatever it returns back to, and new challenges and opportunities and stuff arise, to not forget that and to keep focusing on that.
Yeah. Hitesh, what have you learned about yourself?
Yeah, so, when this first hit, the first few weeks of working remotely, I was pretty happy and quite, sort of satisfied with how easy it was to adapt. But then as time has unfolded, and now we're, literally 7 months into this thing, I did realize a subtle stress that was creeping in to myself. And I think I'm a pretty grounded individual as a whole. And yet I saw myself, reacting sometimes to things that I wouldn't normally react to. And it made me realize that there is an impact of this pandemic that is playing on a lot of people. And it is bringing out, unfortunately, some of the mental cracks that we've seen in society. So it was a reminder to me that, when I'm dealing with, for example, my staff at the foundation, to ask, how are they doing? I perhaps wouldn't normally ask as often as I do these days, hey, how are you coping? How are you doing? And it's a very diverse response. I mean, some have no issues, and some are desperate to get back into the office because of whatever their home environment might not be conducive to working from home. And some with kids also have a different reaction because they're not dealing with multiple dimensions of working from home, looking after children in many cases, and multitasking in more ways than I can imagine. So,
yeah. We're here talking in mid-October, and I wonder from both of you what you feel is possible to predict and what isn't possible to predict in the year ahead, and how you're dealing with that. Greg?
Well, to start with the impossible, timing is impossible. I think, as we've seen over the last 6-7 months, there's been a million different predictions of when things happen, all that kind of stuff. And I think that's the impossible piece to predict is when things, whether it's return or get back or vaccines or all that kind of stuff. I think the timing is very impossible. But when you can predict is that, as Hitesh pointed out, there's more stress in the system. There will still be challenges. People still need that regular communication, and relationships are still important. So you can predict that will continue, and that you need to, keep all those relationships current and keep the communication open, because I think the timing of all these challenges is really hard to predict.
Yeah, Hitesh, the knowns and the unknowns. What are they?
Well, it's interesting because we're in an environment here where I have a chance to speak with the head of research from time to time, who's probably one of the more knowledgeable people in terms of the potential for a vaccine being developed and the timeline for that. So in speaking with him recently, it wasn't all that different than what you probably heard in the media in terms of phase 3 trials, being completed sometime towards the end of this calendar year. 1 or 2 of them will likely be successful and then be, rolled out to the public sometime in sort of spring, summer of next year, with the hope that, with some level of efficacy of the vaccine, we might have a new normal by the fall of next year. That's kind of the, rough timeline. And for us as a foundation, I guess what that really says is it's still a long ways away. And for example, I'm not sure when we're going to be able to hold that in-person gala again. It may be 2-3 years down the road. Who knows where this thing goes? So that's a definite unknown. But at the same time, I do believe there will be a new normal eventually, and you have to think long term. You can't be tactical. You've got to be strategic in these times, and having that long term lens. And we're fortunate that we can have that long term lens because of what I talked about earlier with our contingencies and our diversification. So that's what I hold on to, that stability.
Last question. We've talked all throughout this about some of the stresses and strains and pivots and so on. And I wonder whether you can tabulate all of it and answer a question honestly, because it's maybe a question that you want to answer politically, but answer it honestly. Do you like your job more than you did before the pandemic, Greg?
Yes, I think, challenges, obviously the tough times show, what's important, and it's easy to be, things to go well when times are good. But yes, it reflects back on, I'm happy with the people I interact with on a daily basis. I'm happy with the organization that we've set up and grown from scratch to this, 6 royalty partner diversified business. Our royalty partners have been great. And so, yes, it's been a challenge for sure, but challenge is obviously where things are, yes, stressful, but also exciting and an opportunity. There's always opportunity in times of change. And when the world is static is the lesser exciting times and fewer opportunities, but trying to stay positive and reflecting back on it, absolutely.
Yeah. Hitesh?
Yeah, I would say one of the most important roles of a CFO is to manage during a crisis, right? I mean, to really help manage the business during a crisis. So to be that calming influence, if you can be. And I've had a fair bit of feedback from staff lately, oddly enough, about the fact that I've been able to convey to our workforce why everything's okay. Why we're going to be okay because we have this diversification and we have these reserves built in. And I think when I look back at that, I mean, it's easy to manage something in good times, and you don't necessarily get that sort of feedback that you do in these hard times. So overall, I think it has been more gratifying in some ways to manage through this crisis. But I don't want it to last for very long. I'd be happy to be back to our normal world.
You'd be happy to be managing in great times again. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank both of you, Greg at Diversified Royalty Corp and Hitesh at BC Children's Hospital Foundation. Both of you, congratulations on the awards, and thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure speaking with you.
Our other podcasts in the series are going to feature our other 4 winners: Simon Bodymore of Tasktop Technologies, Andrea Johnson at Pinnacle Renewable Energy, Amy Lamb of the Chartered Professional Accountants of BC, and Don Matheson at UBC Properties Trust. We're going to stage a modest in-person event for our winners on October 27th at Terminal City Club, and invite you to watch it online or at our BIV.com site. I'm Kirk LaPointe. Thanks a lot for joining us today. I'm the editor-in-chief and publisher of Business in Vancouver. We'll see you again.